Hi, everyone. My name is Saujanya Gamajela. I'm the communications manager for Capricorn Power. And we're just doing a bit of a series on Meet the Team of Capricorn. And today we have Dr. Noel Barton with us. Hi, Noel. How are you?
Hi, Saujanya. Good to be with you.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for joining us. And just to get started, how did you even come up with the idea of harnessing waste heat?
Yeah, it's a long story, so settle in and I'll tell you about this over a long period of time. I used to work for CSIRO for many, many years, the government research laboratory in Australia. And I came to a point of career renewal in my mid-50s. And did I reinvent myself inside CSIRO or outside? And I decided I'd leave and I'd do the things that I needed to, or that I wanted to do outside. And I'd become very interested in, concerned about the state of the planet, very interested in renewable energy in general. And in my dwindling years with dwindling strength, I thought I might be able to do something useful. And so I resigned and I set myself up with my own business to investigate new ways of generating power from particularly solar thermal. So I was looking at the heat from the sun and trying to generate power and thinking how that might be done in an Australian context. I worked on that for a long time, and in a sense, I'm still working on it. The first heat engine that I worked out, I thought would be suitable for the Australian setting, where there's lots of empty space, lots of sunshine, large amount of relatively low-grade heat, and what sort of flow sheet or technology would be suitable to convert that into power. And my first engine then was called an evaporation engine. I worked on that for 6 or 7 years. I had the idea, I analyzed it, I eventually finished up building it, and I tried to commercialize it, but it wasn't a success. And it failed quite badly, as it turned out, but instructively. And it failed because it was underpowered, it did use water, and it was large and bulky, and just not good enough. And eventually, after a long and painful period, I realized that it was never going to be a commercial success. So we're halfway through the answer to your question. I had been thinking, though, about how I could integrate that engine with storage of waste heat or heat in general. And I had the idea of storage of heat inside pebble beds and blowing hot air through pebble beds. And then I started to think about what flow sheet would be best suited for integration with heat that's been stored in pebble beds. And I worked on that for a while, and I eventually came up with the flow sheet that basically is what we're working on now. So we've been working on that I've been working on that for 8 years or so now, and with the team for less, 2 or 3 years for most of the team. So that's how I came up with it. It was in response to trying to find a way to, what heat engine would be best to be integrated with heat stored in pebble beds.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story, actually. I think it's fascinating how you've gotten here. And can you talk a bit about its applications? And you did touch upon it a bit, but what experiences in your professional background made you really realize that this engine makes good sense?
Yeah, so there are many heat engines around the world. So a heat engine turns heat into power. Everyone's internal combustion engine on the car is a heat engine. Most of the electricity in the world still is produced by heat engines. So many sorts, different flavors, different ways of doing things. But most of those heat engines aren't really suitable for relatively small installations and where you can install sub megawatt scale. And so I realized that this heat engine that I was working on did have the capability to be put into a shipping container, for example, something like a megawatt a bit ambitious, but something like a megawatt in a big shipping container at reasonably high efficiency. And so the issue there was that there are heat engines around that are competitors, but the ones that are small are mainly based on a cycle called the organic Rankine cycle, and they're not particularly efficient. And so you could get organic Rankine cycle engines at megawatt scale. You certainly can, but at the smallish scale, they're not going to be particularly efficient. And I was looking then for efficient ways of doing things. What my colleagues also, we had been thinking originally about the heat from the sun to provide the heat for these engines. And my colleagues made the very astute observation that that's a hard first step to go to solar thermal power generation, because you are up against a very strong competitor in photovoltaics, and indeed battery storage coming along very strongly as well. And so if you want to do solar thermal, you have to be very, very successful at a very big scale as your very first step, which is a very hard thing to do. And my colleagues had the clever idea to realize that there's plenty of waste heat around in the community. For example, landfill gas, industrial waste heat, biomass combustion, gas from water treatment plants, and so on. And that's a much easier task. In the marketing vernacular, it's lower hanging fruit. And so that's where the engine was directed towards, probably around about 2016, I would think.
Nice. You did touch upon this. What was your journey in building the engine? I guess, why did you build the evaporation engine in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm a mathematician. I do like inventing. That's what I wanted to be, an inventor. And once I'd conceived of the thermodynamic cycle for that engine, then I thought, well, no one's going to believe that it's going to work, so I'll have to build it. And therefore I tried to build it, and I raided my piggy bank, my life savings, and I did build it, and it did work. And that was when I realized one of the very hard lessons about being an inventor, that it's not enough to have a good idea, and it's not enough to build it. You actually have to persuade other people to come along with you, to join you on the journey. And I couldn't persuade anyone to join me on that particular journey. And it's a little bit different now. So one of the interesting things at the moment is that we find people coming along wanting to join us on this particular journey now. So that's very different to the situation of a dozen years ago.
Yeah, I'm with you on that journey now too.
Yeah, welcome.
So what problem were you trying to fix with making the engine? And then, like, what leap, what made you take the leap to making the Barton engine?
Yeah, so there's a very, very deep conviction of mine that the world is in a terrible place. Surely I don't have to tell viewers of this video that we have a climate crisis upon us. A lot of people on the planet, and we're using our resources faster than we can do so sustainably. And so that's a really fundamental core value of mine, that I wanted to make the world a better place using whatever skills that I had. And those skills were basically mathematical analysis and thinking through concepts. That was the, if you like, the guiding star that has been with me the whole time for the last nearly 2 decades now.
That's great. And I think, I had this question when I first joined. Why now? Why do you think no one has built an engine like this before?
Yeah, so in fact, someone has built an engine like this new one that we're working on. The old evaporation engine, no one had done that before. But this new one, someone has built an engine like this. And I didn't find that out for quite some time. One of the things about being an inventor is that you often find your very good ideas have been pre-invented by someone else. And that indeed was the case here. The flow sheet that we're working with now was conceived and patented by a very famous engineer of the 19th century, John Ericsson, in 1833, when he was age 30. And he was an absolute giant of 19th century engineering, and he did get his engine to work, and he went on to have a fantastic career in many, many fields, naval architecture, steam engines of various sorts, and in other applications as well. So it has been done before, but the problem is it's hard. So because it's we have to be a little bit technical now, because it's a gas cycle engine, you have to compress a gas, and that costs you energy or work to compress the gas. And then then you heat that gas, and then you'll get more work back when you expand the gas. So you have to pay for the compression costs, you have to oversize the expander. That's just the way it is. And unfortunately, however, losses are additive on the way in and on the way out. So if the compression losses are half of the expansion gains, then your losses are three times greater than what you think they're going to be, as it turns out. So you've got to get on top of all of those losses, which makes it hard to do. And the engine has valves as well. And so the valves are always going to be difficult. So although this engine was built successfully and demonstrated by Ericsson in 187 years ago, it was never a commercial success. And then to come to the question of why now should it be resurrected, I think in the grand sweep of engine development, there was a movement towards personal mobility and a movement towards military applications and very large scale applications. And energy efficiency itself wasn't so important. We had a lot of fossil fuels around to power engines. And climate change, of course, hadn't been even thought of as an issue 100 years ago. Roll on to the present day, and we know about climate change. We know that energy has to be used well in a climate-constrained world, and we know we have to try to minimize waste, landfill gas, water treatment plants, industrial waste heat, and so on. And so the time suddenly becomes right, 187 years later, after Ericsson first had the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it seems like you have big shoes to fill, but I think Ericsson would be proud.
Yeah, I think Ericsson would be very interested, actually,
Yeah.
because the great man, of course, didn't have computer-aided design, and just to show how far ahead he was of the times, the concept that heat is a form of energy wasn't actually established until nearly a decade later.
Wow.
So that was first done by Joule and others around about 1840, whereas Ericsson's engine was 1833. So he actually didn't need theory to make his engines work. He just did it because of his own brilliance. But I think he'd be interested to see how things have evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like you're not only our co-founder and inventor, but you're also our historian on stuff.
Yeah, I have looked into it quite a lot, and I'm very interested in that. I always find it instructive to look back on what really smart people have done in the past, because you can avoid some mistakes that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Noel. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Fine. Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you. Bye now.
Yes, thanks. Bye.
Bye.